This is called Uncle Luther's Legacy. You know, a legacy is something valuable that's given to you in a will. Well, Uncle Luther had a ranch close to Gulbusk, Texas. Gulbusk is about 30 miles south of Coleman, Texas. And Gulbusk had been originally a huge cattle ranch that was owned by an Englishman named Gould Busk. Well, about 1900, apparently a law was passed that anyone who was not, who was from a foreign country couldn't own land in Texas. So anyway, Mr. Busk devised a very clever scheme to sell this ranch. He hired a couple of men and bought some surveying equipment for them and a load of stakes. And he says, I'd like for you to stake a line through the middle of the ranch. And when somebody asks you what you're doing, you tell them that you're staking out a line for a railroad that's going to be coming through. And confidentially, there will be a number of choice places to buy. So very quickly the word got out and the ranch got sold to small farmers and ranchers. And surprisingly enough, even after everybody had bought their pieces of property and they had found out that Mr. Busk had scammed them, they still named the little community Gould Busk. So anyway, Uncle Luther had a small ranch close to Gould Busk. And this ranch, this was before rural electrification. So you would get out of your car in front of their ranch house, and you would notice, if this was like in June, that the cats or dogs would be slinking toward the house. And the reason they were slinking was because there were scissor-tail flycatchers. I don't know if y'all know what scissor-tails are. They're a bird that catches flies, moths, so forth, and it has long tail feathers that open up like scissors. Anyway, these scissor-tails would make their nests on barbed wire fences out of hair that they would pull out of horses' manes or horses' tails, or if you didn't have a hat on, they didn't mind taking a couple of hairs out of your head, and also, as well as the dogs and cats. So anyway, when I was a little kid, I used to love to go up and visit Uncle Luther. And since they didn't have electricity, they only had kerosene lamps. And kerosene lamps don't put out a whole lot of light. So anyway, they would go to bed like 8 o'clock in the evening. One time I was still up, I tried turning up the wicks and the lamps, and all that resulted in was smoking up the lamp chimneys, which Aunt Ani had to clean up later. So at any rate, Uncle Luther would get up like 4 o'clock in the morning to milk a cow, and he'd wake me up, and he would light one of those old kerosene lanterns. They used to call kerosene lanterns coal oil lanterns. I'm not sure why. But at any rate, it's a kerosene lantern. And we'd walk out to where the cow was, and he'd milk the cow, and he'd let me try too. And they had a couple of cats. And these cats are farm cats. You don't feed them at all. You don't give them canned cat food, because their job is to catch mice, rats, as well as maybe rabbits. But they look forward to milking, because you can shoot milk into their mouths when they get milk all over their faces while they're opening their mouths. Very funny. So anyway, then we'd go back into the house. Well, in addition to everything else, in that part of the country, everybody out on a ranch or farm has what they call a storm cellar, because every now and then a tornado might be coming through. so you can rush out to the storm cellar. A storm cellar is like, it's dug down partway into the ground with dirt heaped up and like a wooden door that you open up and you can go down in there while the tornado is going over. Well, their storm cellar was like covered with spider webs. And I felt like if a tornado comes, I think I'd rather face a tornado than those spider webs. Well, anyway, a number of years went by, and Uncle Luther passed away. And one day my sister said, Aunt Auntie told me that she and Uncle Luther had a safe, and maybe Charlie would like to have it. So I thought, a safe? They didn't have that kind of money to have a safe. You know, what is this? So eventually I went up there after several weeks and went into their house. And this was like in August. It's red hot, and they just had a little fan stirring up the hot air. And she said, well, Charles, the safe is out there in this outbuilding. Why don't you go take a look at it? And I went out there and looked, and it's kind of dim light in there. Well, it wasn't a safe you put money in, it's a pie safe. It's one of those pieces of furniture, home-built furniture, and the doors have like chicken wire, or not chicken wire, but wire, so screen wire, so flies can't get in there and walk around on pies or other food that happens to be in there. So I went back to the house and told Aunt Auntie that I didn't really want the pie safe. And she says, well, Charles, over the years, Uncle Luther, when he was going around to other places, he'd pick up different kinds of scrap metal. It's in a big pile that he collected about 200 yards back at the house. So she says, why don't you go back there and take a look and see if there's something you might like to have. So I started walking back there. In the meantime, their border collie, Happy, started following me, and Happy had a soggy tennis ball. And to the unsuspecting, Happy presents this tennis ball to you. It's soggy, you don't want to touch it, so you throw it, and Happy zooms after it, gets it, brings it back in about 2 seconds, and you're stuck with doing this with Happy all day long. So anyway, I got back there to the pile of this rusty metal, and I look around on it, and it's like old rusty tractor seats and discs from disc plows and so forth. And I was about to leave. I didn't see anything I wanted. And then on the other side of the pile, I saw this old rusty lantern. And I picked it up, and the bottom of it had a rust hole in it, and that's why it had been thrown away, because it couldn't hold kerosene any longer. So I took that back to the house, and I asked Aunt Auntie how much she wanted for it. And she says, oh, that old thing, Charles, you can have that for nothing. So anyway, I take it back home, and I've had it on top of Susan's Hoosier cabinet in our little office. And I look up there and look at that lantern. It brings back all these memories. And that is Uncle Luther's legacy.